Good evening. I'm John Baylor. I'm here today with American public pseudo-intellectual David Baylor.
And I'm here with American not-so-public pseudo-intellectual John Baylor. But I guess you're a little less pseudo because you do have actual degrees.
Yeah, I've got like 180 degrees.
Yeah, I've got 360. So.
And we were talking, you were talking, recently you were wandering around in the real world, you told me.
This is true. I have, on occasion, been in the real world.
And you said you were having interactions with real flesh and blood people.
Correct.
And
as dubious as it may seem.
Yeah. And one of them said something like, David, you're a rogue scholar. I have a question.
This is an accurate account of the conversation, yes.
I have a question for you. Is there such a thing as dragons? People are always talking about dragons. You can read in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles about fiery dragons over Northumbria, and right there in the history books.
I mean, you can read surprisingly modern things. People just like matter-of-factly talk about it, like, oh yeah, and there was a dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a real conversation that happened. But before I answer, before I give you the dear illustrious audience my answer, there's a few other things that we'd like to tell you about here that we're working on.
Okay, yeah, we've mentioned our animation project a little bit, and although we haven't been working too much on the animation, we're continuing to work on writing scripts for this. And as far as visual art goes, then you've been working a lot to develop your skills on that. Why don't you say a little bit about your work?
Yeah. Before I do that, actually, I will say, as far as developing the animation, we are also working on putting together a team to help us with that. I mean, I'm kind of spearheading the animation as far as the artistic style. We're also working on finding people that can help us with, I guess, more of the workload. There is quite a bit of work that goes into a project like this, and we want to do it right. We want to do it with traditional animation as much as possible. That's the best way to get the faithful look that we want. So if you're interested in joining the project in any capacity, have artistic talents, we'd love to hear from you. Or if you know somebody else, we'd love for you to share this with them and send them our way. Help us network, connect with the people we need. We want to put a really good team together.
If you're going to describe the general look in just a sentence or two, what's the general look of it?
Orthodox iconography and medieval manuscripts.
Interesting, but those would be animated like a cartoon.
Correct.
Amazing.
Amazing. Yes, in fact. So as I think many of you know by now, I do now work as an apprentice iconographer. You can actually see behind us here some icons.
Really small.
Yeah, really small.
Way in the background. They're actually bigger than the fingers he's holding up there, but they're far away.
Yes, those are some icons I'm working on currently, and they will actually be for sale, and other icons will be for sale as well. So if you have any interest in that, these ones are actually going to be they're saints that we're working on for early projects. We have hiding out over here behind John, over here is St. George. Hiding out behind me over here is St. Caedmon. Down here is St. John the Baptist. Those are three stories that we're working on developing as kind of our first projects. And so we were kind of thinking we'd like to sell these as kind of a fundraiser / publicity type of thing in connection with that. So if you have any interest in that, or just any interest at all in supporting the project in any way, feel free to let us know. Anyway, we're probably boring you with our little pitch and commercial here.
No, that's great. I mean, I know there are some people out there who want to be involved, some people who would like to help by purchasing some of this.
Yeah, and we also want to keep our audience updated on the project. Let you know it is still going on. We're still working on it. We just really want to do it the best that we can. We want to do it right. So we are working on the story of St. Caedmon as kind of a soft launch pilot, and then the story of St. George over here will be our true pilot, I guess you might say. That's the plan currently. I think that's enough for now.
Okay, yeah, let's dive back to the question.
So back to dragons.
How do you
speaking
feel?
of St. George over here and the dragon?
Oh yeah. Everybody, if people think about dragons, then I don't know that everybody will think of St. George before they think of anything else, but I mean, he'd be pretty high up on the list when you're thinking of dragon stories.
Right. But we won't be talking about St. George, at least not at first, tonight in this conversation.
Not intentionally, anyways.
No,
we
we'll
might
probably get to
it.
Yeah, he might sneak in there. So anyway, as you were saying, this question was posed to me. Like, this is not a hypothetical situation that we were just inventing for the sake of conversation.
No, it was a real person experiencing a real
Believe it or not,
crisis.
I know and talk to real people. And this real person asked me, are dragons real? And the simple answer to that question is yes. And, the thought process that went through my mind with that question is, how do you actually answer a question like that? How do you explain to somebody that dragons are real? And I kind of fumbled around for a little bit trying to explain, well, here's what a dragon is and why it's real. And it's like, but that's not a good way to answer that question. So instead, I gave up on that, and I decided there's a good story I can tell that will demonstrate exactly what a dragon is. And I think after I tell this story, you'll understand, yes, dragons are real, and you'll understand what they are. And that's kind of what I'd like to do for you, our dear audience.
Is this the story of St. George and the dragon?
It is not. This is a very obscure story from the high mountain valleys of the Bernese Oberland in the country of Switzerland.
But is it about a saint who slays dragons?
It is.
This will be very interesting because I've always heard there were other saints besides St. George who slayed dragons.
Yes, there are in fact a great multitude of dragon-slaying saints from early Christian history.
Yeah,
and like I mentioned, actually some surprisingly modern dragon slayers. I think like even up until like the 19th century.
Yeah, I told you, I wish I knew who this was. I probably could have looked it up and figured it out, but there's a Mexican restaurant not too far away from here that's got a big mural painted on their wall that's got this guy with a spear with a cross on it, and he's standing on top of like a South American pyramid, holding up that spear and stabbing a dragon with it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it represents a specific person, but I don't know who that specific person is.
Yeah.
But, just was interesting to me to see, here's another dragon slaying saint.
Right.
Anyways, go on with the story you were going to tell.
Yeah, so this story, it's the story of Saint Stephen, but not that Saint Stephen. It's a different Saint Stephen. So the kind of the setting for this story, there was the story of the Theban Legion, which is also another story that has become obscure in modern Christianity, though during the Middle Ages, especially in the West, was a very, very popular story. The commander of the Theban Legion, St. Maurice, was the patron saint of Charlemagne and of the Holy Roman Emperors, among many other illustrious figures in medieval Western history. And the story was this was a legion from Thebes in Egypt that was sent by Diocletian to what is currently Switzerland and southeastern France to kind of mop up the remnants of the crisis of the 3rd century and like deal with the lingering rebellion that was going on among the people there. And as Christians, of course, they were illegal and they were outed as Christians. They were discovered to be Christians, and this resulted in the governor or Diocletian himself, according to some versions of the story, ordering the decimation of the legion, which means 1 in every 10 people is executed, like just summarily executed on the spot. And so this was their punishment, and they were demanded to recant. They did not. They stood firm, and so they were decimated again. And this kept going on and on like this until the entire legion was either destroyed, like they were all martyred, or they fled across the mountains. And so there are patron saints all over Western Europe that are people who fled from the destruction of the legion. And St. Stephen is one of those figures. Saints Felix and Regula, the patron saints of the city of Zurich, are others. I could look up a whole list. There's dozens of them all over, like Germany, France, etc. And St. Maurice, of course, he was the commander of the legion. And St. Stephen, like I said, he was one of the figures that fled. The story flees across the mountains. And so that's kind of the setting for this story. So the story goes that he flees across the mountains and he comes into this tiny village. So this is in the late 3rd century. So these people are pagans living in fear, living in terror, who had never heard the story of Christ never heard about his birth or his death and resurrection, never heard anything about Christianity. But instead they were living under terror and misery, under the oppression of a terrible dragon. The story describes the dragon. In German, it is a Lindwurm, which is more of a serpentine type of dragon. But the story also describes that it's kind of like a hydra. I don't know if you'd have anything to say about that. I think there's a lot going on kind of symbolically with the nature of these very ancient Germanic dragons. Like they're serpentine, sometimes they're many-headed. And like it seems to me, reading the oldest versions of the story, that they're kind of almost indefinite in their form.
Well, even a snake is indefinite. I
Right.
mean, like the idea of a serpent is something that's like almost just by moving, it's a shapeshifter.
Yeah.
But then you have the multiple heads that a hydra would have. Then you also have this indefinite indefinability. Sometimes, I don't know if it would be the case with this hydra, but sometimes if you cut off a head of a hydra, then two heads are going to grow back in its place. So it's like you can't target the thing. You know,
Yeah.
you can't say like, this is the part that I need to cut off, and if I just do this, then I will defeat the thing.
Right, but it's like the way the story is presented, and I don't know if this is really an ancient element of the story or if this is kind of the way that it was passed down, and the recording that I heard of it from the middle of the 20th century, if that's just how this particular guy decided to tell it. So like he's telling it in the local Swiss German dialect, and I just remember he describes the dragon as, like in Swiss German, it's fast wie eine Hydrox, which is like almost like a hydra. And I think about that as like, how is something almost like a hydra? Like,
Yeah.
Does it have many heads or not?
Yeah.
But like even that in itself is like, there's this ambiguity to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's this serpentine dragon that's like it's described. I'll just read
Well,
here.
hydra, you know, these are also like images of formlessness, which are like water images, and then the word hydra also is a water word.
Mhm.
So I mean, hydra sort of means water monster.
Yeah.
And I say that just because you brought up this idea of like something that's hard to define.
You're right. Yeah. So I'll just read the
And even it's sort of like a hydra. It's like maybe the reason it's only sort of like a hydra is because I can't actually put a name on this thing. I can't actually put a definition on it.
I'll just read this translation I've put together here, where he describes the dragon. He says, a terrifying, gruesome dragon, looking almost like a hydra, but stretching over 20 paces long and thicker than the stoutest tree, had ravaged everything. It had its lair in the Ried, right beside the big winding stone. Every time it slithered out of its hole with its scaly, ghastly body, it caused terrible destruction. And then later on he says, often the dragon would creep through the tall hay fields or the cornfields, trampling everything, stem and stalk, root and branch, into the ground, worse than a landslide. Or it would smash through a barn door or a wall at night and take whatever suited it. The people weren't safe from it either. One after another, those who went hunting or into the woods never came back. Even the strongest men couldn't stand against the beast. On the contrary, anyone who tangled with it was torn apart. And with neither cunning nor trick could they lure the monster into a trap or outwit it. The people didn't know how to help themselves anymore. They grew impoverished, and the land turned wild in patches. Which is like, I want to try to avoid being overt and pointing out symbolically like what this story is talking about there. But I don't know, I guess like allow the imagery to speak to you and think about what the storyteller is talking about here. He's talking about a people who are living under the oppression of paganism, who've never heard about Christ, and they're faced with this monster, and he's describing the sort of terror that the monster works on the people, the sort of horrors that it unleashes.
And if you try to confront it, then you will be torn apart.
Yeah, right. And then that's where I was going next. And like,
Mhm.
not only that, but there is no solution, because
Yeah,
here's
right.
what happens if even your greatest heroes, like a hero in ancient mythology is somebody who slays a dragon, basically. Somebody who kills a monster. Mm-hmm. And it's like here, it's like there's a monster here that there is no hero that has ever been able to take it down. I mean, I guess if you're to be fair, that's the case of every monster in Greek mythology before a hero took it down.
Yeah.
Is no hero before it was, but still, like, and I think that's useful when looking at a story like this, is understand it as existing in the same world as these pagan myths. So this is the same sort of monster being described here as what, like, Perseus would have gone and fought, or what Hercules would have gone and fought, Odysseus, any of these great heroes of ancient mythology when they're facing down these monsters. Like, this is the same sort of monster.
Right.
And it's like a lot of times being described here with a lot of the same ideas behind it. So here's this horrible monster, it's oppressing the people. But what the contrast in this story ends up being is how the monster is ultimately defeated. Because in this story, Saint Stephen, like, there's a lot of things interesting about this story, even in contrast with other Christian dragon slaying saints. You do have, from what I've seen, I've read a number of dragon slaying stories. St. George is one of the best examples. I really love the story of St. George, even though the dragon slaying is like a side note in his story. It's still a good story. The dragon slaying part, that is, it's a good story, and there's a lot going on there. But there's a difference in these Christian heroes and how they confront the monster in comparison to how the pagan heroes before them did. Because the Christian heroes are always confronting them by the power of the cross, and what they're always doing in the name of Christ. Pagan heroes are always confronting them with their own might, their own strength, their own valor, and doing it for their own glory. And, like, because they do it for their own glory, they get glory, and then they become, like, legendary. Like, they become daemons. They become, like, protectors of the place for generations to come. And so it's interesting to me to look at this story in that light and see, like, what he's describing here about, like, a monster that a hero, that kind of hero, can't handle this kind of monster. Like, I guess it's fair to say there are kinds of monsters in the ancient world that heroes can deal with, and there are kinds of monsters that they cannot. And the Christians are the ones who show up on the scenes they're like, we're the ones who can deal. We're the only ones. Christ is the only one who can deal with these particular dragons. And I think that's kind of what's going on in this story. This is a story of a people who had lived under this demonic oppression, and that's what the dragon is. Like, I'm not trying to reduce it to pure allegory and say the dragon is a pure allegory for demonic oppression, because I got to keep in mind my goal here is to answer the question: is the dragon real? And my answer is yes. Mm-hmm. So that's what happens in this story. Is Saint Stephen shows up, and the first thing he does in the story is he actually evangelizes some of the people and starts a church. But what's significant in the church, like in the story, the dragon is described as coming out of the Ried, which is, I believe it's the mountain. And it's at least a geographical feature that's prominent right there. And it's coming out of the winding stone. I'm not sure exactly what a winding stone is, but I like the term. It's a really nice term. Like the winding stone is the stone that's at, like, the... my understanding is it's at the top of where the cave is, where the dragon lives. The dragon lives inside of the mountain. I don't know if that's normal Swiss dragons. I've read a number of Swiss dragon myths, and they tend to live inside the mountains. All the mythical creatures in Switzerland live in the mountains or under the mountains, which I like.
Yeah. Don't you have some living in lakes, though?
Probably, but it seems like they usually live in the mountains.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are lake monsters too. I don't recall any off the top of my head. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
like they usually live in mountains or boulders or something like that. Impressive geological features that rise up.
Yeah.
So this monster lives in this cave in the mountain, and St. Stephen decides when he starts his little community to build his church right there, right on top of the winding stone where the dragon lives, which I really like that. Like to me, like that's just like this is a perfect example of like, well, where else would you build your church? Like, are you going to build your church like somewhere down in the valley and try to protect people against the dragon, or like kind of hope the dragon just kind of like leaves you alone? Or are you going to build your church like right on top of the dragon's lair?
Yeah.
And I just really like that. It's like, of course, you know, the dragon hasn't even been confronted yet.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
but the building of the church is part of the battle against it.
Yes, right. That's where I was going. It's like there seems to be this idea that we're going to build our church right here on top of the winding stone, right here on top of the dragon's lair, in order to call it forth, so that we can fight it, we can confront it, we can face it. Which I just think like that's just excellent on so many levels. And it's just, I think that's just a very good picture of how the church is supposed to be operating. It's a good picture of how the ancient church did operate. And I feel like in a lot of ways it's a good contrast to how the modern church operates.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't feel the modern church is doing a lot of building churches right on top of the dragon's lair. And like people, I don't know. I mean, there is this correct sense, you know, like I used to think of it as like a silly way of thinking, and it is in some ways the way people apply it, but there is this sense in which coming into contact with the evil and the sinfulness of the world pollutes you. And that really is the idea of uncleanness and impurity that exists in the Old Testament. So I kind of understand somebody's aversion to going and building a church like right in the worst place. Mm-hmm. Or going and doing their thing and being a Christian right in the midst of the worst, and instead like wanting to like set up camp along the edges and like coax people out of sin and into the church. But like I really like these stories because they demonstrate to us in a very real way that is not how the apostolic church operates.
Yeah. I wrote this lyric one time that was if you touch what is dirty, then dirty you will be. Mm-hmm. But if he touches the dirty, they come clean.
Right.
And I mean that's like it's through the power of Christ that you can do the same thing. Like that you can go to the winding stone and you can build there, and rather than be corrupted by it, like the power of Christ would purify the place and have victory there.
Right. And it's like that's the same idea of what's going on, why it is on all of the oldest churches in Europe and the Middle East, you'll find pagan temples or pagan burial sites underneath them. Which, like, if you know something about paganism, I would be inclined to think if you know, a church being built on top of the site of a temple is one thing, a church being built on top of a burial site is a different thing, because there's a pretty good chance that that's like the burial site of a cultic hero. Mm-hmm. So it's like they're going back to the idea of a daemon. He's like the guardian spirit, who was historically a person. I'll just give like a little bit of a shout out to Father Andrew Stephen Damick and Richard Rowland, or Deacon Seraphim, I guess, Rowland, and their Great Tales podcast, and they were talking about this with the story of Oedipus, and how like kind of the epic cycle with Oedipus is becoming a daemon, and at the end of his life, like this is why people are fighting over where he's going to be buried, because wherever he's buried, he's gonna after death be like the protecting spirit of that place. And that's really fascinating to me, because what has survived culturally in the memory of paganism in this region in Switzerland is, for the most part, the question of what do you do about your dead? Mm-hmm. because like there are these pagan processions that have survived, and they're clear about why they survived. They survived to exist as a memory, like kind of like a Passover of their culture. Like this is the memory of the bondage that Christianity delivered us from, and that bondage for them was fear of wild nature spirits, but especially fear of the spirits of the dead. And like researching these things over and over again, and I'd love to talk about this more if you guys are interested in it. I hope you are, because I'd be really excited to talk about this. But this just seems to be a major question from what we can tell about the ancient pagan religion in that region in Central Europe, is what do you do about the dead? Because the dead, there seems to be this fear that the dead, like especially the dead in the prior year. I mean, there's only so much we can tell because there's not like written records that have survived. There's just the cultural memory that has survived into the present in the forms of like these like processions around the time of New Year.
There's somebody. Sorry, I divert you slightly from this. Somebody that lives close to me whose husband committed suicide fairly recently. I mean, over a year ago, and she tore down the shed where it happened and planted a tree there.
Yeah.
And I told Liz, my wife, I said she's doing that to keep evil spirits away.
Right.
And I mean,
she probably doesn't know that, but
no. She doesn't conceive of it as that way at all. But like in my mind, it's like, yes, you have to do this. You have to get rid of that shed. You have to plant this tree because the evil spirits there are real. Like it's a danger to now be raising her kids in this place where this thing happened. Like, I mean, she needs some kind of protection from the spirits of the dead, or the spirits that were at work in him, anyways.
Well, so it's really interesting because that is something that ancient Christians perceived as being true, is that people whose lives were lived and especially ended in a demonic way are the spirits that we perceive as demons. Like the sort of spirits that meddle with the world around us in an evil way. Like even Christians and Jews understood that those are the dead, but like not in the sense of ghosts. Like we think of ghosts, like St. John Chrysostom deals with this directly, and like he addresses that, like, well, some people, I'm trying to remember and paraphrase what he said, like some people think that ghosts are the spirits of those who like died a violent death, and people still think that way. Like ghosts are people who like died violently or had like a tragic death or like died with unfinished business, or something like that. That's a very ancient superstition that people have. The Christians said otherwise, and I think for the most part, most pagans also said otherwise. That like, no, the lingering spirits of the dead are evil people, and in death they become like demons. In much the same way that ancient Christians, Orthodox Christians today also believe that like the spirits of those who live a godly life and who live an angelic life in death are something like angels. I don't want to go too far into that. There's other places where we can send you where they've dealt with that question much better than I'm going to. But I don't know. I'm looking at this question of, we're talking about the church being built right on the dragon's lair, and I'm connecting that with two things that are occurring in ancient culture. Churches being built on pagan temples, pagan ritual sites, and especially pagan burial grounds. And a lot of times there's a lot of overlap between those things. Although I think my understanding is that a pagan temple is not going to be defiled by the bones of the dead. Like the burial ground is going to be somewhere else. And that's something that was actually like really disgusting and disturbing to pagans about Christians, is that we would build our churches on the graves of martyrs. And it's like, no, you don't do that. The graves are somewhere else. Like you go and, they would go in like offer like drink offerings to the dead. Like that's something that they definitely did, and perform religious rituals. But the temples were something else. Anyway, I'm kind of wandering a little bit, but there is this huge question in this region of Switzerland, in the Central European region, in the ancient pagan, pre-Christian, pre-Germanic religion, where the primary question, like I said, seems to be, what do you do about the spirits of the dead? And my suspicion is that is part of what's going on in this story. And I guess I'm narrowing in on that element in particular because that does seem to be the primary question of that culture. And so it's like there's this dragon that's terrorizing the people. And I think in part that dragon is like the evil that has dominated the people for generations. I don't want to say it's purely allegory for the evil legacy that's been left behind. And I also think I don't want to exactly say that it is like the dragon is the spirits of the evil dead, but I think it kind of is, in a way.
Yeah. Well, it's, when you mentioned like the spirits of evil people being demons, mm-hmm. Even that is like, I mentioned my neighbor that like, I wouldn't be willing to cast a judgment to say like this was an evil man.
Right.
And yet I would say like there's an evil spirit that needs to be dealt with in some way.
Well, yeah, and it's like if you go back 1,000 years, there's nobody anywhere in the Christian world who would have thought anything other than we need to have an exorcism where this happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's like there's definitely something like this place has definitely been now corrupted and polluted by evil.
Yeah,
and that should not be allowed to stand.
Yeah, and this is not superstition. Like I said, like the wife is going to raise her children, which were not his children. They were only actually married pretty recently, but. Mm-hmm. But she's going to raise her kids in this place where this happened. Like that's actually a real danger.
Yeah.
Not a superstition. that is going to like that has the potential to infiltrate their minds and their view of the world. And so like to live and to grow up in that place is a danger. And so you've got to do something about it.
Well, and I think there's a lot of people, maybe even people listening to this, who don't want to believe that such things are true. But in my experience, all of us, when actually confronted with those things, realize that there's something true about it. Like we can't, I've had these conversations with people in the past. It's like you can't really pin down why that is, but why do you go and put a cross on the side of the road mm-hmm. where your loved one died?
Yeah, yeah.
And like drive down the highway here, and there's like this huge memorial on the side of the fence where there's a horrible accident years ago that killed several construction workers. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, why? It's like because that place, like the identity of that place, is now connected to the tragedy that occurred.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like,
and like if nothing else, like you're putting a symbol of love in that place.
Yes.
And that is far superior to like the awfulness of like all these people dying before their time or whatever, like, mm-hmm. And this is love in Christ, when you're putting the cross there. But again, like very simple, like it would be better to see love and honor when you drive by this place.
Right. Yeah. Correct. Right. And it's like, I don't know, like thinking of the story of the person committing suicide. It's like, why would you ever leave that building there? Mm-hmm. And like everybody knows about like, can you sell a house where a murder occurred? That's like mm-hmm. a common that's like right. a common theme in like movies and television is the murder house.
Yeah.
And like lots of like TV like I don't know, I think of like King of the Hill having this episode with Peggy lying to somebody so that she can sell them the murder house or something like that. It's just a frequent thing that occurs. But it's because, like, as much as you want to escape it, you realize there's something true about it. There's some way in which this is tainted, and like it's exactly the sort of thing that's being described in the Old Testament when it comes to pollution, like the pollution of sin. And so if you put yourself in the context of an ancient people who have never worshipped God, have never encountered, anything good, basically. I mean, probably since the time of Babel, they're dispersed as evil people, as like demon worshipping people, and like completely under the dominance of demons for as long as their people have existed. As long as there has been a culture, the spirit of that culture has been a demon. And so this is the context of these people. It's like, this place is absolutely polluted so completely thoroughly with evil. And it's just something that is remarkable to me, particularly about that culture as it stands today. Because like if you go to this place today, the culture in the Swiss Alps, the best way I would describe it is peaceful and thankful. And I mean quiet and simple as well. But it's just like, I don't know, like listen to their cultural music. I don't know, like just like set up a contrast to the Swiss mountain yodeling to German yodeling or Austrian yodeling, which the Swiss stuff, like the Swiss folk music is just, I don't know, the best way to describe it is just peaceful. Mm-hmm. And then like juxtapose that with these pagan rituals that they still remember. Like look, I don't know, you can look these things up sometimes. I might put some names in the description if I remember, so people can research these things if they would like to. But like they'll have these processions like through the towns, through the villages, where people dress up as monsters, as demons, as well these wild spirits, and they walk around with these huge hammered brass bells and just clang them. And like there's basically would be like this whole procession of people all clanging them. Like they're all clanging them in rhythm. I think even if they didn't want to clang them in rhythm, they would end up clanging them in rhythm.
Yeah.
And like so that they're doing this, and they're making noise, wearing these horrifying, monstrous, grotesque masks, and like I said, like they know why they're doing it. They're doing it because their pagan ancestors did this to drive away the spirits of the dead, and to drive away the wild forest and mountain spirits, which there seems to be a lot of overlap to those being the same thing. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of like this thing that goes on in paganism is, there's this classic debate in anthropology, like, are the pagan gods like cultural remembrances of ancient heroes who have over time been misremembered as deities? And like even in the ancient church fathers and modern Christians as well, there's this question: are they just like corrupted ancient stories, or are they actual entities, demonic entities? And the answer is yes. They're both. They're kind of multiple entities merging into one thing, or multiple identities like coming together. And I think one way you can describe that is because the ancient people that are being remembered as these gods today were people who were acting in the name of that spirit. Mm-hmm. So there's this way in which you think about it for a while. Like it makes sense that you would have a hard time knowing if the wild spirits of the woods and the mountains are the spirits of the dead or something else.
Yeah.
And there's
the question would be, did the spirits of the dead become these spirits, or is it these spirits that influence those people, in some way? Like, you got like this two-way arrow of like, what is this transformation?
Yeah. And like there's this one procession in the city of Interlaken where they're like somebody's dressing up as, well, actually multiple people in the parade are dressing up as this particular spirit of like this big rock edifice outside of town. But then like the story of the rock edifice, like the god, the spirit that haunts this place, is like it's an actual person that actually lived and did something horrible and demonic, and so after his death, like becomes a demon. And like this is something that's just so pervasive in that culture, but just in the ancient world in general, is there's just these demonic lingering spirits of the evil people who did unspeakable things. And I think in this particular story, this is something that happened even after the arrival of Christianity.
Okay, I want to come back to the story because we're still,
well, there's just a lot of threads I think that this story lays out.
Right. Well, I mean, I think part of the theme that we've been exploring is that what evangelism is like a battle against evil spirits,
right,
or demons or dragons, or like however you want to define it. Like that's what evangelism is, and that's what establishing a church
I think I would
is,
be
at least
fine.
in part.
I think I would be fine, and like making it my own personal message that the gospel is primarily go and slay dragons.
But are they real or not?
Yes. So you're trying to get me back to that question. Right. So I guess let's continue with the story. So we left off with him building his church out on top of the mountain, on top of the hill, on top of the rock where the cave is, where the dragon is. So naturally, the dragon is not really pleased about that. So he comes out and he's like, "I'm going to take care of these guys." And obviously, all the people are afraid. And the saint in the story, it says he confronts the dragon with words that, like, unknown words. I don't know. You can imagine the context of the story. Maybe he's saying something in Greek, or I don't know, maybe even Egyptian. But he's saying something in a foreign language that they don't know.
But unknown words is interesting, anyways. Like, I mean,
well, that's a good point. Like, don't try to figure out.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Was he just saying some prayer in Greek? It's like, no, you're right. Like, unknown words.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good story element. Anyway, go on with your.
Oh well, I don't want to make too much about like speaking in tongues or something like that, and invite a certain theological interpretation that's not quite what I have in mind. But like the mystery of what he's saying is important to the story, probably.
Yeah, so it says that he raised his cross towards the dragon and spoke to it in a strange tongue with powerful words that they couldn't make sense of.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that...
I mean, that is just like forgetting about like the possibility of Greek or whatever. I mean, that's just like an amazing presentation. Like the fact that he would have words that we can't make sense of.
Right.
So
that's why he's a saint.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, he has a vision of the world that we can't make sense of also. He has a relationship with God that we can't make sense of.
I almost want to read this passage in the actual original language because just it's so good. I'll read it. First I'll read it in English. He says, the dragon first raged. This is the dragon's response to what we just said here. Mm-hmm. The dragon first raged and roared, spewing fire, then hissed and growled, choked and gurgled, as if those words were nearly strangling it. Finally, it turned around and slunk back into its lair, and since then, no one has seen it again. Should I read it in Swiss German?
Go ahead.
I just really like the sound of the word.
Yeah.
Der lindworm het zich tobet og brullet og voorgestoven. Daarna pfuffet og krochlet, giechet og gurglet. Wie wien op den worte schiergar moest worden. Og door het der zich omdraait en is in der huil versloffen. En ziet er haar het nieme mixe. These are some good words.
Yeah.
and I don't pronounce it even quite as powerfully as a native speaker would. I just like those. Look at him again.
Your alliterations. Yeah. So he slinks away and nobody ever sees it or hears from it again since that time.
Right. Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that's interesting to me about this story in particular, because it's a dragon confrontation story and it's a dragon defeat story, but he doesn't slay the dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Like the dragon isn't killed. There's another story from not very far off in the same region of Saint Beatus. Maybe we'll talk about that story sometime. I really like that story as well. And I'm really unimpressed that there's an Orthodox book about the Swiss saints that doesn't make a big deal about Saint Beatus.
Yeah.
Like it's one of the most popular names in the country.
Yeah.
It's a culturally very important name. Story, I mean. But anyway, that's a digression for a different time. In that story, Saint Beatus kills the dragon. And the dragon falls dead into the lake and causes the lake to boil.
Mm-hmm.
But in this story, in contrast, the dragon isn't slain, but it's defeated and driven away. And so
but in Beatus' story, the dragon still might also come back, right?
I don't remember if that's explicit, so I guess I don't want to.
Okay.
I don't want to say it either way. I don't remember that being explicit. I remember this story being remarkable in how it's explicit that the dragon is not dead but could actually come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I like this idea that the dragon retreats into the depths, into the darkness. You could say into the pits of hell,
mm-hmm.
where it lives.
Yeah.
Because that's where it's coming from. Think about that imagery. What does it mean that a dragon lives in a cave under the ground? And that was the way the story is introduced in the original story. I guess I didn't bring that out. Is that there's this well in the village that usually is nice, good, clean mountain spring water, but every once in a while, for some reason, the water comes out all dirty and disturbed and foul smelling and tasting.
Mm-hmm.
And the story that the old elders of the village say is that's when the dragon who lives under the mountain is stirring.
Yeah.
And then he proceeds to tell, here's the story of that dragon.
Mm-hmm.
But just think about what it means. Even that in itself, what does it mean that this dragon is still under the mountain and sometimes your water is polluted by its stirring?
Well, there's this interesting, Jesus didn't kill Satan. When you have the descent into hell and this kind of victory and freeing of the captives, but you don't have the killing of the ultimate bad guy. And when Jesus casts out a demon, you've got the guy that can't be bound with chains, and you have the legion. I say a demon, but that says we are legion, and so he sends legion into the pigs, and they run off the cliff, and then they die.
All right.
But it doesn't sound like in that story he's killed the demon. It does sound like that thing still exists, and I can save you from it. But that's not the same. I'm not here to kill the thing.
Right.
I'm here to save you from it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there even is this sense, and if you think about what a dragon is, you also have to consider the question: can you actually kill it?
Right.
You can defeat it,
mm-hmm.
but can you actually kill it? And I think I would be inclined to say no, you can't actually kill it. So slaying a dragon doesn't mean it's forever destroyed and defeated.
Right.
But that's what I really like about this story is that actually winds up being a central element to this story is the story is both a story of the saints' victory and the gospel's victory over the dragon, over this demonic oppression, but also a warning. Maybe I'll just read that passage again here. he says, but now they say when the cross no longer stands firm, the dragon creeps about in secret, and the old misery lingers here. The dragon's never really dead, believe me. From time to time it stirs and twists, and that's when the water turns murky, again the water from the well. Don't just laugh it off. Anyone who's peered deep into the human soul knows what dreadful monsters lurk there, rattling their chains and eager to tear things apart. We've seen it in other places too, where the cross has been cast aside or twisted. There a dragon gains the upper hand and wreaks havoc. I'm sorry I did such a terrible job and butchered my reading there, but we got through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really like that, and I think above all, this is why this story in particular stood out for me as the answer to are dragons real? As because I think that passage in particular, that element of the story demonstrates, like, yes, dragons are absolutely real, and again, I don't want to explain it. I don't want to try to. I don't want to try to like categorize it and pin it down, because I think about the thing about a dragon is something that can't be pinned down, something that can't be defined. And like that's one of the things that's remarkable about a Christian saint confronting it is how do you confront something that, something like a hydra or something like a serpent that is writhing and always changing, possibly many-headed, many-faced,
Well, I mean, how do you confront something that's beyond your ability to understand it,
right?
And will destroy you, that's what its aim is,
right? Yeah, that is so much what's going on in this story. It's like, how do you confront something like this? Like, as much as you can describe it for what it is, it's something that is bigger and more powerful and more terrible than anything you can conceive of. Like 20 paces long and thicker than the thickest of trees. Like, that's a monstrously huge thing.
Yeah.
But it's something that's so monstrously huge, yet is also able to like slink around in tall grass without being seen. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you think about that for a minute, that actually doesn't make sense. Because obviously something that's 20 paces long and thicker than the thickest trees.
Thickest trees are really big.
Yeah, right. Now, like, if you've ever been in this region of the world, like, there are some huge trees there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm talking about, like, big old honkers. And especially, like, in the ancient times, these ancient trees that have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, like, they're massive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like, we're not talking about like a nice little tree in your yard.
Yeah.
We're talking about something that's like 3 feet or more across. Something like that isn't gonna, like, if this is just like purely some kind of creature as we understand it in the materialist sense, like, obviously that thing's not gonna sneak around without somebody seeing it. But yet in the story it does.
Yeah.
So that's like cluing you in on something here, that this is not something you should be thinking of in those terms. But I just really like that element of the story, that like we touched on earlier, it retreats back, it's defeated, it slinks away. I like that, especially that imagery, like it just like slinks away in shame and defeat. It's like it writhes around and makes all this terrible noise and spews fire and does all this thing to try to budge the saint from his bravery, from his courage in the gospel, his courage in Christ, like tries to dissuade him from that, but at the end of the day realizes that against this power I have no power and I can do nothing but slink away in shame. But then there's just this element that the only thing that's keeping it in hell where it belongs, that's keeping it in the darkness, in the abyss, where it's not bothering you, it's not terrorizing you, is the cross. And that, like, if you let the cross fall, or if you let the cross become twisted and crooked, then it's going to come back, and all of its terror, all of its evil is going to come back. And like, I really like that. I think that's something we often like struggle to come to grips with. We struggle to make terms with is, Christianity does this thing in the world, or does this thing in my own life, but now what? And there is this error in modern Christianity where we tend to think Jesus has given me the victory over this or that, or Jesus has saved me from my sin, and now I'm saved and I'm safe. And I just think that's such a supremely dangerous way of thinking. Like, I don't even want to get into any kind of debate, theological debate. I'm just strictly speaking in terms of what is useful for me in my day-to-day life, and like, that's not useful.
Well, that's there's a gratitude in that, which is very valuable. But I mean,
I don't feel like that gratitude is missing if you understand what's keeping the dragon at bay is the cross.
Yeah, right.
So it's not like so this isn't a pagan story where they're having to come back every year and offer a sacrifice, offer an offering to the grave of the hero who slew the dragon.
Yeah.
So that he'll continue to protect them from this evil.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that kind of story. So there's not like this constant action on our part.
Right.
This constant offering of sacrifice, this constant repetition of the ritual. Like, the thing that keeps the dragon away is Christ. And as long as we serve Christ, as long as we abide in Christ, as long as the church stands, the dragon cannot come back.
Yeah.
But as soon as, that's really the image that I have in my mind when I'm thinking of this, the imagery he has of the dragon, is the cross on top of the church. And when the cross falls from the top of the church, that's a symbol for the church falling. And because I guess for me, like, that's the imagery in my mind of what's going on in the story. This isn't so much a personal story of, like, if you personally, like, don't onto the cross properly, then you're bringing the dragon back. Maybe there's some of that, but I think it's primarily about the church.
Yeah.
Because like, that's such a central element of the story is the church that the saint erects, on the very spot where the dragon was, on this very place of evil. And it's like, if you allow the church, and again, not strictly even speaking about the building, but also not discounting the importance of the actual building. But like, if you allow the church to fall, then that's when the evil comes back.
Yeah.
It is the church as the body of Christ.
Yeah. But as far as like,
that's keeping the dragon away.
Part of the connection, how does that connect to you as an individual? Is like,
hierarchically.
Yeah, I mean, you as an individual are part of a church, and like, part of your duty is to assure that the church does not fall. And I mean, like, if you're a parent and you're raising your kids and they're going to church, I mean, there's all kinds of things that are required of you to be a good parent.
Yeah.
But one of those is to make sure that your church remains healthy, and that it's healthy in a way that will endure even after you die.
Well, yes, and so like, the way I think about that is that the primary person which Scripture is addressing, Old Testament and New Testament, the person, and it's important that you understand this as person. The person that the Scripture is addressing, that Christ is addressing, that Christianity is addressing, is the church. And like, you have to think of the church as a person.
Yeah.
But everything that applies to the person, the church is described in Scripture, both in the New Testament and the Old, in personal terms, and as a person.
Yeah.
In prophetic imagery, the church is always represented as a person. But everything that applies to that person also applies to you and to me. I mean, like, just as the church is a community, so are you. It's like there's all of these different voices speaking to you. I mean, you should understand it as spirits. That's how the saints, that's how the Christians always understood it. And you have to, you have to sort out how to bring all these things together in a kind of unity, serving towards one end. And that's the same thing that the church is doing.
Yeah, right.
It's like, how do I don't know. That's why it can't possibly be true that the church is a mystical body only, because if there's not an actual functional unity of the people serving a single united purpose, then there is no church. And obviously that's not happening in the broader Christian community. There's no unity there. There's just a theoretical, abstract concept of unity, but it's meaningless. Anyway, that's a little bit of another digression, but that is, I think, the best way to make points is through illustration.
Yeah.
I think that's really, that's the whole story. There's a lot more we can say. I don't know. I've done a lot of talking. I don't know if you want to do some more commentary.
Not really. I mean, I know I didn't talk a whole lot, but I felt like anytime I wanted to jump in and make a comment, then I did. I mean, if I said anything about dragons other than what we've said so far, then it'd be too much of a tangent. Mm-hmm. There are other things I would love to talk about, actually, but for this, I think, well, we started with the question of are dragons real? Is this something that really exists? And then you said yes, and then your story is kind of an answer to this. And what we see in that is, well, in the story, in the telling that you're working with of the story anyways, then the storyteller specifically says, if you've looked down into the deep dark parts of your own person, then you have seen that this is true.
Yeah. Right.
There are dragons out there, and if the cross isn't lifted above everything else, then those dragons will rise up.
Yeah.
And this isn't. It's not like. I think you also kind of are sort of dancing around you want to be clear, this isn't just allegory. This isn't like the dragon represents something. You could say, I would say this is symbolism, but I would also have a different idea about symbolism than what a lot of listeners would. So in some sense, you could also say it's not like the dragon is a symbol for something else and it represents something. The dragon is, there is a force that's beyond yourself, that is working toward your destruction, and you can call that the dragon. The other thing I said, I maybe be too much of a tangent, but I think that part of the reason that dragon stories exist all over the world, and maybe this isn't true because, well, I won't say why it's not true. I tend to think of this as I think maybe the reason that people tell these stories about saints defeating dragons is because when the saint comes in and spreads Christianity, then I think people actually have visions of dragons being defeated, and I think they have dreams of dragons being defeated. So I think people, you could even use the word literally, even though we're talking about dreams and visions. I think people literally have experiences of dragons being defeated.
Yeah. And I think so. It's what I think. It's going to sound at first like a contradiction of what you're saying, but it's actually not. Is that the reason people tell these stories as the saints slaying dragon is because that is the best way to describe what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when I relate it to dreams and visions, then what I'm saying is in the deepest part of yourself, then you understand it as a dragon.
But it's when something as monumentous as what happens when Christianity comes to these people happens, how do you tell that story?
Yeah, right.
How can you possibly convey? Because it's you can try to talk Like, let's just say, for the sake of illustration right now, that it is pure allegory, which I don't believe, but I think that makes my illustration simpler, just to let's reduce things for a little bit here. Let's say it's pure allegory, and that what actually happened is the saint went and evangelized the people, converted them to Christianity, turned them away from paganism to worshiping Christ, and that changed their lives for the better. Okay, but if you just tell the story that way, it can't possibly capture the gravity of what actually happened.
Yeah, right.
And us looking at it now 2,000 years later, actually it's 1,700 years later, we can't understand that.
Right.
We have no concept.
Yeah, like the depth of oppression that you were living under
Right.
before, and the like the release of that, the experience of being set free from that.
Well, and it's like I was kind of making that point earlier, is that what defines this culture today is this sense of like peacefulness and thankfulness, and I would say a sort of joyfulness, a simple joy. And you set that in juxtaposition to what defined it in the past and what is echoed even still today in these pagan celebrations that they've held on to, which I think it's important to hold on to those things. Like, what's reflected in that is a people that lived in terror, a people who had a horrible life, a people who, these were not people that had peace and joy. And it's like you go and you look at those mountains, like I've been in those mountains, and like there is something sacred about them. Part of the reason there's something sacred about them because it's in those mountains that 5,000 martyrs shed their blood. and I think the importance for that can't be underestimated. It's like the stain of the sin that polluted that place in ancient times has been washed by the blood of martyrs. Like there's not just those martyrs, there's martyrs all over the countryside that happened in the early days of the church.
Yeah.
And like that's significant because what's reflected in the most ancient stories is that those mountains were terrifying. That they were oppressive. They were like, yes, they're beautiful, but we can only see them as beautiful because of what Christ has done. The ancient people did not see them that way.
Yeah, right.
They saw them as something full of dread and terror.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, that's why you talk about dragons, is because we have no, like, I today can go to the place where this happened, and I have no concept of what it was like for those people. Because for me, it's like, wow, this is amazing countryside.
Yeah.
And this is an amazing culture. And, I'm biased, it's the culture of my ancestors, but it's just like, there's no connection between what exists today and what existed before Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Like that world is gone. And so how do you remember that? How do you tell that story to subsequent generations? Like, you can't just tell them, oh, we were pagans and it was bad and it was scary. And we didn't, our ancestors didn't like their lives. But then Christ came along. It's like, that's really cheapening what happened.
Right.
But if you tell the story in this way, and again, I am oversimplifying it. I'm not arguing that this is all that's happening.
No, but there is a sense of, like, if you tell what you might call the literal truth or the objective truth, then you are failing to say what happened.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that's ultimately what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of going on a roundabout way of addressing that, is why is that the case? How is that the case?
Right.
And then what was the other thing I was going to say to that? Oh yes, the other thing I was going to say is also don't try too hard to figure out more about the dragons than what the stories tell you. I think there's that temptation, and I hope I'm not doing the very thing that I'm cautioning against. But it's like, I don't think we should look at these stories and try to figure out, like, okay, so what actually is the dragon?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just understand that the story is communicating something to you, but it's communicating something to you beyond reason.
Yeah.
So don't try to reason.
Well, and I mean, the story itself does kind of, in a sense, it says, don't try to understand this for a reason. Don't try to make sense of what the dragon is. Just accept this.
Yes.
And, you know, I mean, stop there because it's kind of like this, but I'm not going to tell you exactly what it was like.
Well, yeah, and it's like that's going back to like the framing of this conversation is somebody asked me, are dragons real? And, you know, trying to drum up like all of my symbolic arsenal that I have in my back pocket and like explain these things and then realizing like, no, this is not the right way to go about explaining this to somebody who's legitimately wondering if dragons are actually real.
Yeah.
And the right way to do it is I'm going to tell them this story. And at the end of the story, then I ask them like, so do you understand what dragons are now? And this person's like, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And it's like, because you do, and don't go beyond that.
Yeah, right.
Don't take it any further.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and that's not the kind of understanding that you can like put in a dictionary.
Right.
But
which is kind of like why
but
we
you
as
can
modern,
still say confidently like, yes, I see it.
So it's like why we as modern people struggle to understand those stories. Like we want to allegorize them.
What I think we do is we say ancient people took this story literally and they were stupid for doing that.
Yeah.
And actually when we do that, we're the one that's taking it literally.
Yeah. So it's like did St. George actually slay a dragon? And my answer to that question is absolutely he did.
Yeah.
And if you think that this is just a silly legend that they came up with hundreds of years after the fact, and you don't understand what this story is about. So like what I would say is he absolutely did slay an actual dragon, and you can go to the place where it happened.
Yeah.
And don't ask me to explain it beyond that.
Yeah.
Because the nature of a dragon is something that defies explanation. And I think that's the most important way to understand it. That's kind of why, like, I don't know, kind of why we've launched down all of these rabbit trails, just like trying to illustrate, like, there's so much weaving into these stories, and that the only way you can actually relate to these stories and what they're actually telling you is by understanding that these stories are trying to tell you there's more to the surface. There's more to just what's on the surface level of this story. Like, read between the lines. Like, I always think of, like, in the book of Revelation, how, like, the angel, like, repeatedly says, like, those who have ears to hear, let them hear. And it's like he's telling you, it's like, think about this, but don't reason through it. Like, just, like, listen. Like that's how you understand these things. Like just listen or just look. Don't try to figure it out. Just open your ears.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we have to do with these stories. And like I said, I really like this story. There's just so many good elements that I don't know. I just felt like in particular this was the best story to answer the question of are dragons real?
Yeah. Okay, well, hey, I'm satisfied with that. I don't have anything else I'd like to add.
Yeah, all I'd like to add is like I would really love to explore more of these obscure stories from my own ancestral culture.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really good stories. I think there's a lot of really unique stories that are often overlooked. I think a lot of times Swiss culture gets lumped together with German culture, and it really shouldn't be. It's a very unique culture in its own right,
and it does not have the same demons that German culture has.
No. Like I would love the opportunity to talk about Swiss dwarves.
Yeah.
Which is like the elves of Switzerland. The primary spirit that Swiss stories seem to be dealing with, aside from the wild haunting spirits that we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like in the Middle Ages, the wild haunting spirits kind of get pushed out, and the dwarves is what rises up. These are the stories we're telling.
Right.
Because these are the spirits that we're still encountering.
Yeah.
And just as a teaser, the dwarves in Swiss folklore disappear because people stop being thankful for what they do. And I hope that's enough of a teaser for you to want us to answer the question of what does that mean?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and maybe we can do some of those as our animated stories, as that project goes a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
But certainly if people are interested, then something we can tell some of these stories the way we did and chat a little bit in the middle of them.
Yeah, and I think there's some value in telling. I'd love to be more involved in this. Seems like an ever-growing project of like recapturing our stories, recapturing our mythology, and I'd love the opportunity to tell the stories of our people. Like even our own people, for the most part, don't know them anymore.
Yeah, right.
But I just think there's so much fascinating going on there that adds to the conversation. I hope you guys liked this video and would like to hear more like this in the future. If so, let us know in the comments. Let us know what you thought. I also hope we raised a lot of questions for you about this, and that you'll ask those questions below. Keep the conversation going. Maybe there's somewhere we can go with this, but I don't know. Let's have the conversation about that. Let us know your thoughts.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us.